All right, let's jump right into this explainer. Today, we're unpacking one of the most vivid, ancient, and honestly just brilliantly constructed victory ballads in human history, the Song of Deborah and Barak. Now, if you've spent any time studying ancient literature or military history, you know that victory songs are a dime a dozen. But what makes this specific King James text so absolutely fascinating is its intense dramatic structure. I mean, it literally reads like a modern cinematic script. We're talking sweeping cosmic battlefields, claustrophobic assassinations, and some incredibly dark, tragic irony. I'm not going to give away the whole ending right up front, but I promise you by the time we finish walking through this narrative, you'll see exactly why these words have survived for thousands of years.
Listen to this staggering cosmic scale right out of the gate. They fought from heaven, the stars in their courses fought against Sisera. The author wants us to know immediately that this isn't just some localized border skirmish between a few rival factions. No, according to the text, the heavens themselves are waging war. The stars are literally aligning against this Canaanite general, Sisera. It sets this incredibly high-stakes epic tone. But before we get into that massive cosmic clash, the text actually forces us to rewind and look at the absolute rock-bottom despair that kicked this whole thing off.
Act 1, the trembling earth and empty highways. The bleak stage is set. So the ballad starts out with this raw display of divine power, but then it quickly pans down to the gritty, terrifying reality on the ground for everyday folks. It says, in the days of Jael, the highways were unoccupied, and the travelers walked through byways. Just imagine living like that. It paints this stark, suffocating atmosphere of fear. If you had to travel anywhere, you absolutely did not take the main roads, you crept through the brush, you stuck to the hidden paths. The text tells us the villages just ceased to function. It's a complete societal collapse brought on by an overwhelming, oppressive enemy force. And you might be wondering, why were they so terrified? Well, the reality of their situation is captured perfectly in one staggering number: 40,000. Out of 40,000 people in Israel, not a single shield or spear was to be seen. None. The ballad states it bluntly. They chose new gods, then was war in the gates. Because they shifted their allegiances, they were left utterly defenseless against the heavily armed Canaanites. No weapons, no safe roads, and honestly, it looked like they had zero hope. But right in the thick of that despair, the momentum just completely flips. We hit the absolute turning point of the text. Until that Deborah arose, that I arose a mother in Israel. Notice that specific language. She doesn't call herself a warrior or a general or a savvy politician. She specifically calls herself a mother. The whole text pivots from the paralyzing fear of a defenseless nation to the fierce, unstoppable, protective instinct of a mother defending her kids. That single line changes the entire trajectory of the story. Which brings us to Act 2, the roll call of the tribes and cosmic warfare. The pacing suddenly ramps way up with this region-wide call to arms, and it brilliantly highlights the complicated political realities of the ancient world. Deborah and her military commander Barak sound the alarm. On one side, you have the tribes that willingly offered themselves, groups like Zebulun and Naphtali, who are praised for jeopardizing their lives right unto death. But on the flip side, you've got a completely different story. Gilead stays safely across the Jordan River. Dan decides to just chill in his ships. Asher hangs out on the seashore. The ballad completely calls them out for staying safely behind while their brothers marched off to war. In the absolute perfect description of this is used for the tribe of Reuben. For the divisions of Reuben, there were great searchings of heart. Now, let's unpack that beautiful 17th century King James phrasing. What does searchings of heart actually mean? It means deep, profound indecision. They literally sat among the sheepfolds, listening to the flocks bleat, totally paralyzed by hesitation. They're debating the pros and cons of the alliance, and ultimately, they do absolutely nothing. It's a masterful contrast between their endless intellectual hesitation and the bloody, real-world sacrifice of the willing tribes. Now, for the tribes that actually do show up to fight the kings of Canaan, they quickly realize they aren't fighting alone. We're back to that massive cosmic scale. The stars fight from heaven, and nature itself turns into a weapon. The river of Kishon swept them away, that ancient river, the river Kishon. The King James translation gives us this incredibly visceral, sensory detail of mighty horses prancing, literally breaking their own hooves as a massive flash flood completely wipes out the technologically superior Canaanite chariots. It's so bad that the enemy general Sisera has to abandon his entire army and run for his life on foot. And that leads us right into Act 3, the tent and the window. Here, the author drastically slows down the pacing. We zoom out of that chaotic, muddy, wide-open battlefield and push right into an intensely quiet, claustrophobic climax. Sisera, completely exhausted and running on adrenaline, hides in the tent of Jael. The text explicitly says she shall be blessed above women. And why? Just look at the calculated steps she takes. 1, he asks for water, but she gives him milk and butter in a lordly dish, totally lulling him into a false sense of security, so he crashes out. 2, she quietly picks up a tent nail and a heavy workman's hammer. 3, she smites his head, driving that nail straight through his temples and into the dirt. And 4, he lays dead. It is suspenseful, it is brutal, and it's this incredibly intimate assassination that perfectly mirrors the massive military victory that just happened outside. Honestly, what's truly haunting here is the pure poetry of the translation. At her feet he bowed, he fell, he lay down. At her feet he bowed, he fell. Where he bowed, there he fell down dead. Just feel that repetition. It's almost rhythmic, isn't it? The author is intentionally slowing time down, making us linger on the absolute finality of this terrifying, invincible conqueror being reduced to nothing at the feet of a lone woman in a tent. And then comes what might be the absolute stroke of genius in this whole ballad. It's essentially an ancient cinematic crosscut. We just saw Jael in the tent, active, victorious, holding the hammer. But then, the text suddenly cuts away to Sisera's mother at a window, crying through the lattice. Why is his chariot so long in coming? Why tarry the wheels of his chariots? She is entirely passive, totally oblivious, and just vainly waiting for a triumphant parade that we, the audience, know is never ever going to happen. It is just masterful, poetic irony.
And to make it even more tragic, the text actually details the conversation between Sisera's mother and her wise ladies. How are they comforting themselves? They just assume Sisera is running late because there's so much loot to divide. A damsel or two for every man, and beautiful embroidered clothes, a prey of diverse colors of needlework on both sides. They are literally daydreaming about the captive women and the rich spoils they're going to exploit, completely and utterly blind to the gruesome reality of that tent peg back in Jael's tent.
So, we've seen stars fighting from heaven, an ancient river sweeping away an entire army, and a brutal, calculating assassination inside a quiet tent. All of these dual forces, massive divine intervention and highly personal human action, are driving toward one specific goal. What is the final takeaway from this wild historical text?
It all culminates right here. So let all thine enemies perish, O Lord, but let them that love him be as the sun when he goeth forth in his might. And the land had rest 40 years. 40 years of peace. Through this terrifying combination of nature rebelling, a mother rising up to protect her people, a few willing tribes risking it all, and the ruthless courage of Jael, the oppressive fear from the beginning of this explainer is completely shattered. But it does leave us with a pretty provocative thought to ponder, doesn't it? When cosmic justice and brutal human warfare intertwine so intimately, are we meant to celebrate the violence itself, or do we simply stand in awe of the extreme lengths required to finally give a broken land some rest? Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and keep seeking out the incredible structures behind these ancient stories.